Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe YouTube channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. I hope the fasting is treating you well. I do understand the Catholics are in their Lent period. The Muslims are in the holy month of Ramadan. The Anglicans are in their also holy month and that kind of thing. For born agains, it does fall whenever they deem it fit, but I do wish you well in your respective religious endeavors or faithful endeavors. Anyways, welcome back to the channel. In the aftermath of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's interview with Gary Neville on Sky Sport, I thought there were a number of talking points that did catch our attention that we should focus on. It's been almost a year since Sir Jim Ratcliffe took management charge of Manchester United after buying a 28.9% stake as controlling stake in the club with his Ineos, team. So it's been over a year. That did cost him about 1.3 billion pounds, according to figures from multiple sources online. So if you do find that figure slightly different, do not be worried of that. But anyway, in that whole interview, he spoke about a wide range of issues that we'll be looking at: Manchester United finances, transfers surrounding the club, and the desire to build a new stadium, but more importantly, the new manager in Erik ten Hag. However, our starting note will be on former Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag, because Sir Jim Ratcliffe did acknowledge that they made the wrong decision when they decided to stick with Erik ten Hag in the summer, despite their, we all know that they desired to let him go at the time, and they did conduct interviews with numerous managers, with the likes of Mauricio Pochettino, Ian McKenna, and all the others that were under consideration for the role. But eventually, after reviewing the entire season, in which he had won the FA Cup, beating up against Manchester City by 2-1 in the finals, they made the decision to keep him and handed him a one-year contract extension at the time, and he stayed. However, just 9 games into the season, they did sack him due to a poor run of results, unconvincing results, despite all the investment they had made in the summer to bring in new players, the likes of Lenny Yoro joining the club, Matthias De Ligt, and things of that nature. So clearly, one had hoped that given that investment, bringing in the likes of Joshua Zirkzee to help Rasmus Højlund, that they would stick with Erik ten Hag for long. But it looks like that decision was reverted. So they moved to sack the manager, and eventually that caused another range of things to happen, because it was immediately after Erik ten Hag's sacking, to be replaced by Ruben Amorim, that we saw Dan Ashworth leaving the club. And to that particular point, he says there was a lack of chemistry with sporting director Dan Ashworth with the rest of the team. So he does acknowledge that they made the wrong decision in keeping Erik ten Hag. However, he also notes that there were mitigating circumstances, citing that they had, as a team or as a new management team, they had only been together for a short amount of time, just a couple of weeks. And in that case, he's speaking about, the club CEO, Omar Barreda. He's speaking about, of course, Danny Ashworth in that same team. He's speaking about Jason Wilcox, the club's technical director, and Sir Dave Brassfield, who is the Ineos director there. That's for the footballing side of Ineos, or the football investment side of Ineos. So at the time, of course, United were not doing well, but ever since then, not much has changed, because the club still linger in 14th position with just 36 points. However, so here's what he had to say, quoting from him directly. It was too early for us to make a big decision. In reality, we hadn't been together as a team for very long. It was just a matter of weeks, and it's quite a big decision, isn't it? And also, it's quite difficult. It was quite difficult to extract in that season when we arrived, Erik ten Hag's performance from the structure around him. Now, remember, because Erik ten Hag wasn't being the first manager that came into question at United. We saw it with David Moyes, who did succeed Sir Alex Ferguson when he left the club in 2013. We did see it with Louis van Gaal. We did see the same with Jose Mourinho. We did see the same thing with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer later on. So clearly, it was not a new thing that considerations to sack a manager were being taken. However, so there was what he's trying to say in this particular quote is that when they were examining everything around the manager, they did question themselves whether it was due to the incompetence of the manager or there were bigger underlying factors in regards to the whole structure of the club. And that's why he says when they arrived, extracting Erik ten Hag's performance from the structure around him, that was a challenge. Anyway, he goes on to say that obviously the structure around Ruben Amorim is completely different. There is a really strong relationship and a really strong support culture for Ruben Amorim. Jason and Ruben talk to each other 2 or 3 times every day. Omar Barreda speaks to Ruben every day, and every time I go to the match, I speak to Ruben. Now, when he talks about the structure being different, is because he says they are more closer as a team. Of course, when he says that, he says this in the aftermath of Dan Ashworth leaving, who, by the way, just spent about 5 months at the club in the job as sporting director. He spent more time on gardening leave when they were them pulling him out of Newcastle than he spent in the actual job at Manchester United. And just as a footnote, in recent times, he was in contention to be the next sporting director at Arsenal. He was in consideration. But let's not divulge into that. So he continues to say that, but it was quite difficult to see what the environment Erik was operating in. Was the erratic performance a function of Erik, or it was a function of the organization? And we couldn't really get to the bottom of answering that question with certainty, I suppose. So we gave Erik the benefit of doubt. So here in this particular moment, he's speaking to the relation that guided them to retaining Erik ten Hag. They weren't sure. Was it him, the manager, that had the problem, or was it the whole structure at the club, the organization, the way it functioned as a whole? Was it the one causing issues, causing the manager to underperform? Because not everything at Manchester United can be blamed on Erik ten Hag as a manager or any previous managers that have been in the role that may have not succeeded or have simply partially succeeded. So clearly, they weren't sure, because remember, they're also new to the club, so they're trying to understand how all the pieces fit together and what's the root cause of the problem. And again, we've spoken about United's problems over and over through the course of the season. So he was further asked whether they do regret the decision, whether he regrets the decision that they made at the time to keep Erik ten Hag and had him a new year contract. Because eventually, when they sacked him, nine games into the season, having given him a new year contract, that meant that when they sacked him, they had to pay him. So that's more money spent out on a sacked manager who ideally they shouldn't have given a new contract extension, because at the time of giving him the contract extension, he had a year left to his then contract. So they added on another year. So, and then things didn't work out. So here is what he had to say, whether they did regret that decision. He says, yeah, it was the wrong decision. We made the wrong decision. It was an error. So yeah, I suppose in that sense, I regret it. I think there were some extenuating or mitigating circumstances in having made that decision, but at the end of the day, it was the wrong decision. So hands up, me, of course, on that one. So when we spoke about the poor performances of Erik ten Hag in this season prior to his sacking, of course, as a manager, you're not always confident staying in a job, but very well knowing that your employers, as in the market, searching for your replacement. He had vividly observed that process go on in the summer, because remember, club went into the summer, they went into a season-long review of the club structure, the club performances, and then decided eventually, which they now agree was the wrong decision. Upon review that, okay, there were mitigating circumstances. Of course, United suffered lots of injuries last season, but they managed to win the FA Cup. So clearly the manager had done something right, that even with all the problems that they did face, something good had come of it. They had managed to lift silverware that landed them into, the Europa League where they are now. Never mind that they did draw the first leg against Real Sociedad, 1-1, but they still have it all to do at Old Trafford come next week on Thursday. So, and that kind of thing. So, they weren't really sure, but he finally admits it was the wrong decision. They should have made the change in the summer and brought in a new manager at that stage. So, he does, speak to that and acknowledges. So, he goes on in another part of the interview to speak about, of course, Ruben Amorim and his current era. At the time of speaking, of course, we all know that Ruben Amorim has managed Manchester United through 26 games. He's lost 9 of those, drawn about 7, and won 10 games in that run. So the results themselves are far from convincing. However, like I keep mentioning, of course, they are out of the FA Cup. They got knocked out of the Carabao Cup. They're nowhere near winning the Premier League, or even promising that they may finish in the top 10 or get a direct qualification in the Europa League or UEFA Conference League and anything of that nature. Their only hope is winning the Europa League as their route to European football next season. So, be that as of it may, like I did mention, they have it all to do this week on Thursday when they meet Real Sociedad in the second leg. A hurdle I think they can get over, given that they do have home advantage. Cup competitions and cup games are usually decided by small moments, small margins. It could be the difference because, beat them, knock them, and then get yourself set up for the next opponent in line and that kind of thing. So, he's spoken about the new manager and he's heaped praises on him. He says he thinks he's done an excellent job. He goes on to cite his Man United's 1-1 draw against Arsenal on Sunday. We all know how that turned out. United nearly won that game. Had it not been for the rogues of David Raya, who made, I think, 2-3 very important saves in that particular game, the result would have been very, very different. So clearly, he cites that given all the problems he's facing, he thinks he's done a very good job. Of course, we all know that Ruben Amorim is dealing so many injuries. Even in that particular game, they had to lose Lenny Yoro. Luke Shaw is absent. Mason Mount. Both players have hardly played in the last 2 seasons because of injury. Amadou Diallo, who had started to be the spark in this United team, of course, did get injured. Harry Maguire is out through injury. Victor Lindelof, was he a victim? Anyway, with all that in mind and context, clearly things have not gone his way. He's had lots of injuries to deal with. And then, again, to the extent of the squad, they do not have some players. They've had to loan out some players. The likes of Jordan Sancho is out of loan in Chelsea. Anthony is to Real Betis. Marcus Rashford is done to Aston Villa. All players out on loan. That means it makes the squad thinner. That's why they had to call on the youngsters in Chido Martin Obi, who is a striker that they got from Arsenal in the summer. We also Aiden Heaven come on that game against Arsenal to face his former bosses, who he just recently departed with in January, and that kind of thing. So here is what he had to say in his own words, speaking about the manager. He says, I think Ruben is an outstanding young manager. I really do. He's an excellent manager, and I think he will be there for a long time. You are beginning to see a glimpse of what Ruben can produce. I think you saw a glimpse of it against Arsenal. How many players against Arsenal on the bench did you recognize? How many have ever won a Manchester United shirt? 4. the first team. As there is no squad left, we are down to the last 10 or 11 men in the squad, really, of a proper first team players. Ruben is doing a super job. Now, in the context of injuries, it's hard to disagree with him. I think for some of us that have disagreed with him, when certain players are available, we disagreed on the structure within which they play. But against Arsenal, again, we saw an adaptiveness to the kind of opponent they were playing. Yes, the team setup did not change, but they did play that bit of a low block. We saw they defended with a back five that sat really deep well, and of course, they looked to exploit Arsenal on the counter, and whenever those moments came, they came into the game with the expectation that Arsenal will dominate possession and play and all that kind of thing. So they did what the kinds of West Ham have done to get the result against Arsenal, and clearly they almost got that result. Now, every time you have such a team that plays with a low mid block and that kind of thing, you do get the chance that Arsenal commit all their players, including defenders, to as far as beyond, the center, the opponent's center arc. So to as far as there, and then once you get in that, long pass over them, you can really catch them on the break. You can, get spaces in and about that, and we saw all that. You all remember Declan Rice's last minute clearance, I think, to deny Rasmus Højlund the opportunity to score. We saw the double save from David Wire. Again, those moments did come when Arsenal did have very few numbers backwards because they had committed most of their men forward. So, in overall, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is saying Ruben is a very excellent manager and will be at the club for a very long period of time. If you do disagree with him, you can leave us your opinion down in the comments section. And if you do agree, again, give us your view on what you think of his opinions in assessing the club, where they are and where they want to go. So, like I said, he did speak about a very wide range of issues, but we are just nitpicking for those that are very important. And then he went on to speak about Manchester United's financial challenges. Of course, this was a topic that we all expected he should tackle. There's a lot of unpopular decisions that have been made around the club, including taking away £40,000 from the old Manchester United Players Association. And we're not talking about players that did play under Sir Alex Ferguson. We're talking about players that played pre-Sir Alex Ferguson. And it's a mere £40,000. It's no secret that is in itself pocket change for Manchester United. And I remember Gary Neville was pressing him on this, and he did ask him, now, why did you offer alternatives? For example, do a dinner with the current players to raise this money, to raise the £40,000, do, auction of jerseys, player jerseys and that kind of stuff to raise that £40,000 so that you can keep, that fund running. And Sir Jim Ratcliffe was simply saying, nobody suggested that to us. I don't think should have waited. Anyway, internally, maybe the suggestion did come up, but Gary Neville was pressing him on that, and he says £40,000 is really small money. But he spoke in larger context in regards to the club's financial challenges, and he says by the end of this year, Manchester United would have run bankrupt, would have run cashless. Their cash would have been depleted if they did not take the hard decisions they've had to make. What are some of these decisions they've had to make? Again, we've spoken about most of these. You remember we spoke about the redundancies, laying off employees. 250 were laid off last summer, and this coming April, another 200 are being laid off in redundancies, again, to curb club spending. Meals have been taken away from, club staff at the club canteen, especially for non-playing staff and that kind of thing. So all this is meant to cut down costs. He did cite a particular example saying that they had a body language specialist, a body behavior language specialist. And he was saying, why do you need that? You do not need that. Now, of course, in the larger context of organizations, maybe you need that. But given the squeeze of finances that United do find themselves in, they do not find that no longer a very important role for them to retain on, among very many other things. So he did blame the current situation on the previous management, the wrong decisions made, and in form of buying the players, how much those players were spent on. He went on to say that some players are not good enough, some players are on exorbitant wages, and while speaking to that, he cited the likes of Andre Onana, Casemiro, Anthony, Jordan Sancho, as we are about to see. He's saying that these are challenges that they inherited from the previous regime. So, for example, he said, particularly, if you look at the players we are buying this summer that we didn't buy, we are buying Anthony, we are buying Casemiro, we are buying Andre Onana, we are buying Rasmus Højlund, we are buying Sancho. These are all things from the past. Whether we like it or not, we have inherited those things and have to sort it out. So, take an example for Jordan Sancho, bought in 2021 from Borussia Dortmund for a fee of 73 million pounds. Now, this summer they will be paying 17 million pounds to Dortmund. Because remember what happens with transfers is, for example, if a player is signed for 80 million pounds and the player is signed on to a 5-year or a 4 or 5-year contract, those payments are spread out in the contractual years of the player. For example, say the player is bought for 80 million pounds and he has put pen to paper on a 4-year contract. So the club, let's say the buying club in Manchester United, may say to, let's say, a team like Ajax that we'll be paying you 20 million pounds every financial year. So those payments are spread across over 4 years and then they'll be completed. So this is the situation in which United are in. That's what he's trying to speak to say they still have to pay 17 million pounds to Borussia Dortmund. Now, of course, he did join them in the summer of 2021, but then, of course, the following year, they did buy players like that's the Brazilian international in Anthony, who is out on loan to Real Betis. Now, specifically to back on Jordan Sancho, he's out on loan to Chelsea, but he says they are still paying half of his wages. So he thinks that's a deal that was perhaps not well negotiated. I think that's what he's trying to say. That okay, we made perhaps a loss in buying this player who has not really worked out for us, but we've loaned him out to a big club and are still paying part of his wages. Similar thing with Marcus Rashford. He's loaned out to Aston Villa, but Aston Villa are only footing about 75% of his wages, and the 25% is covered by United. So now, while that deal was done under his charge, he doesn't say that one was the wrong one, but he says some other deals could have been negotiated better. I do not know the salary negotiations for Anthony at Betis, who is paying how much in percentage, but you could find that there is a bit of a similar situation, that while they are still paying for these players in transfer fees, they also have to cover their wages while those players are not even playing for the club, that kind of thing. So he goes on to say, of course, like I was saying, Anthony joined the club in the summer of 2022 from Ajax in a deal believed to be north of 81.5 million pounds. Then you had Casemiro joined from Real Madrid for about 70 million pounds. And then the following summer, that's 2023, they did sign Rasmus Højlund from Atlanta for about 72 million pounds, and goalkeeper Andre Onana from Inter Milan for about 42 million pounds. Now, like I explained to you, these deals are structured to be paid in installments. I'll give you the example at Arsenal. Arsenal are still paying for Declan Rice. By the time Nicolas Pepe left Arsenal, they were still paying for him. That kind of thing. So it does help. It does happen across different, clubs. We all know the situation at Chelsea. That's why they do have these new players that they've signed on to very long-term contracts. For the first time, we've had contracts of 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, 6 years, and that kind of thing, because Chelsea are trying to spread their payments over the course of a period of a long time, over the course of a period of a long-term contract, and that kind of thing. We saw it with the deal for Mukalo Modric. We saw it with the deal for Moises Caicedo. We saw it with deals for Philippe Jorgensen, the goalkeeper, and that kind of thing, to say the least. So they are still paying monies in transfer fees for these players. He, however, goes on to say that speaking transfers, that in the summer they are not looking to sell their young talent as a means to raise money to reinvest in the squad. And particularly here, he does cite players like Kobe Mino, who is still under new contract renewal negotiations with the club. They are yet to come to an agreement. There's a disparity between the players' demands on wages and what the club is willing to offer. And then, of course, remember, he has already cited it that some players he believes are on very high wages unnecessarily. And I think in that in particular, he was speaking about the likes of Casemiro, who is earning north of £300,000 a week, the likes of Marcus Rashford in that region, the likes of Jordan Sancho, the likes of Andre Onana. They're being paid, high wages. I'm not saying Andre Onana receives north of £300, but in his particular view, the wage structure in itself is not fitting of the talent that they do have at the club. So he says they are not willing to sell their young players like Kobe Mino, Alejandro Garnacho to raise funds to reinvest in the club. We all know about the interest from Napoli, from Chelsea for Alejandro Garnacho, but he says it won't be that raising finances won't be the motivating factor should those players leave. They are not looking to sell their young players. But however, he continues to say that players like Marcus Rashford will leave the club permanently to raise funds that can support Ruben Amorim in the summer to reinvest. For those of you that do follow us adherently, we've spoken about United's challenges. We've taken a look at their summer, how it may look like. We did speak about the 11 players that could leave the club. We did speak about what their transfer window could look like. And in that context, we said, given the challenges with finances, maybe you will have to hold your breath. Do not have your expectations so high that the club is going to go out there and spend £200 million, £300 million in trying to acquire new players. So that may not happen because they are really short on finances. However, it's not to say that they won't be doing any business, because we all know there are plenty of holes to fill in that team. There are question marks technically on goalkeeper Andre Onana. Of course, we all know they do need a center back, because Victor Lindelof, I do feel he will be leaving the club in the summer, despite the signing of Lenio and Matthias De Ligt. Of course, you do have Harry Maguire in there. Then the incoming of Aiden Heaven, the likes of Patrick Togu. We all know about the injury problems of Luke Shaw. We all know that Tyler Malacia could leave the club. He's already out on loan with PSV. So they may need, backline reinforcements. So they may need to bring in bodies there. In midfield, Casemiro, when the right offer comes with a team that can meet his wages, they'll have to let him go. However, he may be intent on staying to complete his contract, because there may not be a club out there willing to pay him all those wages. But nonetheless, the likes of Christian Eriksen, whether he leaves or not, that Manchester United midfield will need a reinforcement beyond the signing of Manuel Ugarte, who they bought in the summer, beyond Kobe Mino, and that kind of thing. Then the forward lines, of course, Pasmas Hoyland, Joshua Zirkzee, things have not really clicked into place. But we need the winger when Marcus Rashford permanently departs. Antony could end up at Real Betis, where he's had, some good time. We do not know whether Real Betis will be able to afford his transfer fees, or it will be another season-long loan. But whichever the deal is, you get the feeling that they will need another winger. So it looks like there will be plenty of business that needs to be done at United Camp in the summer. So allow us keep at that, so that we do not make this very, very long. But do let us know what your thoughts are about Manchester United, Sir Jim Ratcliffe's, revelations there. Of course, he went on to say that they do want to build a new stadium. We did speak about those plans. They want 100,000-seater stadium, the Santiago Bernabeu. They do want to, further upgrade their Carrington training ground. Of course, they've had to refurbish Old Trafford because we also last season it had a leaking roof. They are having problems with rats in the stadium and that kind of thing. So there's plenty to be done. So he's spoken about all those things. So do let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. But do not forget to kindly subscribe, like, and comment so that we can continue to do. Otherwise, stay blessed, and I'll see you next time.